Captain Jake Morrison stood at the observation window of New Geneva Station and watched the last human cargo ships prepare for departure. The massive orbital platform had been humanity's pride for over a century, but now it felt empty and cold. Workers in environment suits moved between the docking bays, securing the final loads of equipment and personal belongings. That would make the journey to their new home beyond the galaxy. Jake pressed his hand against the reinforced glass and sighed. In 48 hours, this station would belong to the Zephyrians. They had already sent their advance teams to catalog everything humans were leaving behind. The blue-skinned aliens walked through the corridors with their scanning devices, marking items for salvage or disposal. They treated human technology like outdated junk, but Jake knew better. Every system on this station had been built by human hands and maintained by human minds. Ambassador Lisa Harper entered the observation lounge, her diplomatic uniform wrinkled from long hours in the negotiation chambers. She carried a datapad filled with the final agreements and looked exhausted. The past month had been brutal as she worked to secure safe passage for all human populations scattered across the galaxy. The Galactic Council approved our departure request, Lisa said, settling into a chair beside Jake. High Chancellor Vexthal signed the documents an hour ago. He seemed almost eager to get rid of us. Jake turned from the window. Did he give any reasons beyond the usual complaints about human inefficiency? Lisa shook her head. The same old arguments. We're too emotional, too unpredictable, too focused on individual rights instead of collective order. He said the galaxy would function better without our constant disruptions to established protocols. Through the window, they could see one of the Zephyrian inspection teams examining the station's fusion reactors. The aliens moved awkwardly in the tight maintenance spaces, clearly unfamiliar with human engineering approaches Jake had designed those reactors himself, building in redundancies and manual overrides that could keep the station running even during major system failures. The Zephyrians would probably strip out those safety features as unnecessary complications. Dr. Elena Rodriguez joined them, carrying her personal research files. She had spent 15 years studying alien biology and building cultural exchange programs between species. Her work had helped prevent 3 different interspecies conflicts by identifying biological and cultural misunderstandings before they escalated. I tried one last time to convince them to maintain the medical exchange programs, Elena said, taking a seat across from Lisa. The Caltharian representative said human medical practices were primitive and potentially dangerous. They don't want our doctors working on alien patients anymore. Jake frowned. Human doctors had been treating alien illnesses for decades, often finding solutions that specialized alien medicine missed. Dr. Rodriguez herself had identified the cure for Zephyrian lung rot, a disease that had puzzled their best physicians for generations. But the aliens preferred to believe their own propaganda about human inferiority. Commander Paul Stevens entered the lounge in his military dress uniform. He commanded the small fleet of escort ships that would protect the civilian transports during their journey to the edge of known space. His face showed the strain of coordinating the largest evacuation in human history. Final headcount is complete, Paul announced. 2,400,000,000 humans across 837 worlds. The last transport leaves tomorrow at 1400 hours. We'll have everyone out of Federation space within the week. Lisa nodded. The aliens are already moving their administrative teams into our former territories. The Zephyrians get the core worlds, the Caltharians take the industrial sectors, and the smaller species divide up the rest. They've been planning this partition for months. Elena looked out at the departing ships. Do they really think it will be that simple? Our colonies weren't just cities and factories. They were integrated systems that took generations to develop. The agricultural worlds alone support food production for half the galaxy. They believe their technology is superior, Jake said. Chancellor Vexthal told me their automated systems can replace human workers with greater efficiency. He seemed genuinely convinced that we've been holding back galactic progress. Pohl activated his communication device and spoke briefly with his fleet commanders. The escort ships were positioning themselves around the final convoy of transports. Each ship carried thousands of families leaving the only home they had ever known. Many had been born on worlds that were now being handed over to alien administrations. The Hive Queen Zartek sent a personal message, Paul said after ending his call. She wanted to thank humanity for our service to the galaxy and wished us well in our future endeavors. She also mentioned that the insectoid colonies would benefit from our departure since they won't have to accommodate human dietary restrictions anymore. Jake almost laughed at the irony. The Hive had been one of the most dependent species on human support. Their rigid social structure made them excellent at following established procedures, but terrible at adapting when situations changed. Human technicians had been constantly modifying Hive equipment to handle unexpected problems that their inflexible programming couldn't manage. What about the research stations? Elena asked. We've got scientific installations throughout the galaxy, studying everything from stellar formation to xenobiology. Are they just going to shut down 20 years of ongoing research projects? Lisa checked her datapad. The Galactic Science Consortium is taking over all human research facilities. They claim our scientific methods are too chaotic and unstructured. They want to restart all current projects using proper alien methodologies. Elena shook her head in disbelief. Human scientists had made breakthrough discoveries by approaching problems from unexpected angles, while alien researchers followed rigid protocols. Humans experimented with unconventional approaches that often led to surprising results. The cure for the Centauri plague had come from a human botanist who noticed similarities between alien symptoms and plant diseases. The communication system chimed with an announcement from the station's operations center. The final passenger shuttle was boarding at Docking Bay 7. Anyone remaining on the station after departure would be left behind to work under alien administration. Jake walked back to the window and watched the last group of humans board their transport. Children pressed their faces against the shuttle windows, looking back at the only home they remembered. Their parents carried small bags containing a few personal items and memories of lives they were leaving behind. Commander Stevens received another transmission from his fleet. All civilian transports are loaded and ready for departure. We're cleared for a hyperspace jump on your command. Ambassador Harper stood and straightened her uniform. Then it's time to go. The galaxy has made its choice. They believe they're better off without us, so let's give them what they want. The four humans left the observation lounge and walked through the empty corridors toward the shuttle bay. Behind them, the Zephyrian inspection teams continued their work, cataloging human technology they would never truly understand. The aliens were confident they could improve on everything humans had built. As their shuttle undocked from New Geneva Station, Jake looked back one final time at humanity's greatest engineering achievement. Soon it would be just another alien facility, modified and upgraded according to Zephyrian specifications. The humans who built it would be forgotten, dismissed as primitive engineers who did their best with limited understanding. The shuttle joined the convoy of transport ships heading toward the edge of Federation space. Behind them, the galaxy celebrated humanity's quiet departure and began the work of dividing their former territories. The aliens were certain they had removed a weak link from their civilization. They would learn differently. Admiral Katie Brooks stood on the bridge of the UHS Wanderer and studied the long-range sensor displays showing the former Federation territories. 3 months had passed since humanity left the galaxy, and the ship now floated in the dark space. Between star systems monitoring communications from their old home, the crew worked quietly at their stations, analyzing data streams that told an increasingly strange story. Katie had commanded deep space exploration missions for 12 years. But this assignment felt different. Instead of searching for new worlds to explore, she was watching an entire civilization from the outside. The Wanderer carried the most advanced monitoring equipment humanity had ever built, systems designed to observe without being detected. Lieutenant Amy Walsh approached with a datapad containing the latest intelligence reports. She had been tracking shipping movements and communication patterns across former human space for weeks. Her analysis showed problems that the aliens either didn't notice or refused to acknowledge. Admiral, the Zephyrian trade routes are running behind schedule, Amy reported. Average delivery times have increased by 30% since they took over human shipping hubs. Their logistics computers keep generating error messages they can't resolve. Katie nodded and pulled up the shipping data on her command screen. The Zephyrians had confidently announced they would improve human trade efficiency by 40% using their superior organizational systems. Instead, cargo ships sat in docking bays for days while alien administrators struggled with routing, problems their computers couldn't solve. What about the Caltharian industrial sectors? Katie asked. Amy scrolled through her reports. Production is down across all major manufacturing worlds. They're having problems with the automated assembly systems. The Caltharian engineers keep trying to upgrade the human-designed equipment, but every modification seems to create new malfunctions. On the planet New Eden, Governor Thexmore walked through the agricultural processing centers with growing frustration. The Zephyrian administration had promised to increase crop yields by implementing their advanced farming techniques, but the results were disappointing. The human-built irrigation systems refused to respond properly to Zephyrian control protocols. Thexmore stopped at a control terminal where two alien technicians struggled with diagnostic codes they couldn't interpret. The system displayed warning messages in human language indicating problems with soil, mineral levels, and water distribution timing. The technicians had tried to reprogram the system using standard Zephyrian agricultural software, but the modifications only made the warnings multiply. Why did the humans make these systems so complicated? One technician complained. Our farming computers should be able to control simple irrigation pumps and fertilizer dispensers. Human engineering is primitive, the other replied. They probably added unnecessary features to make their work seem more important than it really was. But the crops in the fields told a different story. Plants were yellowing from improper nutrient distribution, and several growing sectors had been flooded by malfunctioning water systems. The human farmers who once managed these facilities had understood the delicate balance required to maintain soil health and plant growth cycles. Dr. Ben Carter reviewed medical reports from his research station positioned beyond the galactic rim. As humanity's former chief medical officer, he had maintained contacts throughout the Federation's hospital networks. The data he collected painted a troubling picture of emerging health crises across alien worlds. The Caltharian homeworld was experiencing an outbreak of respiratory infections that their doctors couldn't contain. The disease had appeared shortly after human medical staff left their hospitals. Ben recognized the symptoms from his years of treating cross-species infections. But the Caltharian physicians dismissed human medical knowledge as outdated and unreliable. The infection is spreading through their air filtration systems, Ben told his research team. Human technicians used to maintain biofilters in alien hospitals because we understood how different species bacteria could interact. The Caltharians removed those systems as unnecessary human complications. Dr. Sarah Kim, Ben's deputy, examined the data from the Zephyrian medical networks. They're seeing similar problems on their core worlds. Multiple species outbreaks that used to be contained by human immune protocols. The aliens never realized that human medical staff served as natural buffers between incompatible biological systems. On the bridge of the Wanderer, Admiral Brooks received reports from monitoring stations positioned around the galaxy's edge. Each station tracked different aspects of the post-human Federation, and all showed similar patterns of decline. The aliens had assumed human contributions were minimal, but removing humans had created unexpected gaps in their civilization. Commander Pete Johnson returned from a reconnaissance mission to the outer territories where smaller alien species were struggling with infrastructure failures. His scout ship had observed several worlds where transportation networks had completely broken down after human maintenance crews departed. The Vorthan system is in bad shape, Pete reported to Katie. Their orbital elevators stopped working last week because nobody knows how to recalibrate the gravity compensators. The human engineers who built those systems used Some kind of intuitive adjustment process that isn't documented in their technical manuals. Katie studied the reconnaissance photos showing cargo containers scattered around the base of a massive space elevator. The Vorthans had tried to fix the system using their own engineering approaches, but their rigid mathematical calculations couldn't account for the subtle variations that human operators had learned to manage through experience. The elevators were designed to require constant human oversight, Pete continued. The alien engineers assumed those operators were just monitoring automated systems, but they were actually making dozens of micro-adjustments every hour to keep everything running smoothly. Dr. Helen Martinez analyzed the latest communications intercepts from her xenosociology lab aboard the research vessel New Dawn. She had spent years studying how different alien cultures interacted within the Federation structure. Her current work revealed how human departure had disrupted social and political relationships between species. The Galactic Council meetings had become increasingly chaotic, without human diplomats to mediate between different cultural viewpoints. Humans had served as neutral translators who understood the subtle meaning behind alien communication styles. Without that cultural bridge, misunderstandings were escalating into serious political conflicts. The insectoid hive is having disputes with 3 different species over trade agreements, Helen reported to her staff. The problems stem from communication failures that human translators used to prevent. The hive communicates through pheromone patterns that other species can't interpret properly without human assistance. The communication networks themselves were beginning to show strain. The galactic internet had been designed by human engineers who understood how to make different alien technologies work together. As equipment failures mounted, the aliens discovered that their replacement systems couldn't maintain the same level of compatibility. Lieutenant Commander Rick Davis monitored the emergency frequencies from his position aboard the surveillance ship Deep Watch. The number of distress calls had tripled since human departure, but response times were getting longer. As coordination problems multiplied across the galaxy, the Zephyrian rescue services can't communicate properly with Caltharian emergency teams, Rick observed. They're using incompatible protocols that human operators use to translate automatically. Ships are getting lost in space because the different species can't coordinate rescue efforts. Admiral Brooks walked to the observation deck where she could see the distant glow of the galaxy they had left behind. The lights seemed dimmer than she remembered, though she knew that was probably her imagination. The real changes were hidden in the details that only careful monitoring could reveal. The aliens had celebrated humanity's departure as the removal of an inefficient element from their perfect civilization. They believed their advanced technologies and superior organizational systems would create a new golden age of galactic prosperity. Instead, they were discovering that humans had been holding their civilization together in ways they never understood. The quiet competence that aliens had dismissed as mediocrity was proving to be irreplaceable. Katie activated her personal log to record her observations. History would want to know what happened when humanity walked away from a galaxy that didn't appreciate their contributions. The galaxy was learning that some things couldn't be replaced by superior technology or advanced algorithms. Sometimes the most important work was done by people who made everything else possible, even when nobody noticed their efforts. 3 months was just the beginning. Captain Ron Davies watched the emergency broadcasts from his observation ship positioned at the edge of the galaxy. 6 months had passed since humanity departed, and the alien civilizations were facing their first major crisis. The confident predictions of improved efficiency had been replaced by desperate calls for technical assistance that no one could provide. The bridge crew worked silently around him, monitoring dozens of communication channels that carried increasingly frantic messages from worlds across the former Federation. What had started as minor technical difficulties was now cascading into system-wide failures that threatened entire planets. High Chancellor Vexthal appeared on the main screen, broadcasting from the Zephyrian capital world. His blue skin looked pale, and his usual arrogant demeanor had been replaced by barely controlled panic. The atmospheric processors that maintained breathable air for his planet's 20 billion inhabitants were failing. and Zephyrian engineers couldn't stop the decline. We require immediate technical consultation regarding human-designed environmental systems, Vexthel announced to the empty space where humanity used to be. The Zephyrian Empire offers favorable trade agreements and territorial concessions in exchange for engineering assistance. Ron's communications officer, Lieutenant Dan Foster, shook his head in amazement. 6 months ago, he was telling us to leave because we were holding back galactic progress. Now he's begging for our help. The atmospheric processors on the Zephyrian capital were human-built systems that had seemed simple and reliable for over 50 years. They quietly scrubbed toxins from the air and maintained perfect atmospheric composition through millions of micro-adjustments every day. The Zephyrian technicians had assumed the systems ran automatically, but they actually required constant human oversight to handle unexpected variations. Dr. Helen Martinez studied the technical reports from her mobile laboratory aboard the research VSSEL Far Horizon. The data showed catastrophic failures occurring across multiple worlds as alien engineers attempted to maintain human-designed infrastructure without understanding its underlying principles. The fusion reactors on Kepler-442 are approaching critical cascade failure, Helen reported to Captain Davies. The Caltharian engineers keep trying to apply their standard reactor maintenance procedures, but human fusion systems work on completely different principles. The industrial world of Kepler-442 had been one of the galaxy's major manufacturing centers, powered by fusion reactors that human engineers had custom-built to handle the planet's unique gravitational conditions. Chief Engineer Zulvash and his team had been confident they could improve on human reactor designs using superior Caltharian technology. Instead, they discovered that the reactors used intuitive plasma containment methods that couldn't be replicated by standard alien engineering approaches. The human operators had learned to feel the subtle vibrations and energy fluctuations that indicated when containment fields needed adjustment. Without that human touch, the plasma was becoming increasingly unstable. Zulvash stood in the main reactor control room watching error displays that his computers couldn't interpret. The human-built monitoring systems showed warning patterns that made no sense according to Caltharian physics textbooks. Every attempt to correct the problems using standard procedures only made the instability worse. These human systems are completely irrational, Zulvash complained to his assistant. They violate basic principles of plasma dynamics. How did they ever make them work in the first place? His assistant pointed at a handwritten note left by the previous human operator. It contained adjustment procedures that seemed to have no scientific basis, just instructions to listen to the reactor hum and feel for the right harmonic frequency. The Caltharians had dismissed such notes as primitive superstition. Commander Steve Johnson led a reconnaissance mission to observe the collapse of the insectoid hive civilization. His stealth ship positioned itself near the hive homeworld just as Queen Zartek's final transmission reached the galaxy. The hive had been one of the most rigid and structured societies in the Federation. Their social organization functioned like a biological machine, with each individual following predetermined roles. But that same rigidity made them completely unable to adapt when their human-designed life support systems started failing. Queen Zartek's voice carried desperation as she broadcast her final message. The environmental controls in our breeding chambers have malfunctioned beyond repair. Our larvae cannot survive the temperature fluctuations. We request immediate assistance from human engineers to prevent the extinction of our species. The hive environmental systems had been designed by human engineers, who understood that insectoid biology required precise atmospheric conditions. The systems automatically compensated for seasonal variations and metabolic changes in the hive population. When the human operators left, the aliens had tried to simplify the controls by removing what they considered unnecessary complexity. Without those human-designed safeguards, the breeding chambers experienced temperature swings that killed developing larvae. The adult hive members couldn't reproduce successfully, and their population began declining rapidly. Within months, one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations was facing extinction because they couldn't maintain the environmental systems that humans had built for them. Dr. Nancy Foster analyzed the intercepted communications from her Xenosociology research station. The messages revealed a pattern of cascading failures that extended far beyond individual technical problems. The alien civilizations were discovering that human contributions had been woven into every aspect of galactic society. The galactic internet was fragmenting as communication protocols failed without human maintenance. Different alien species had developed incompatible networking technologies over thousands of years, and human engineers had created the translation systems that allowed them to communicate effectively. As those systems broke down, entire sectors of the galaxy lost contact with each other. The Andorian cluster has been offline for 3 days, Nancy reported to her research team. Their communication relays were based on human-designed compatibility protocols. The local aliens tried to upgrade the systems using their own technology, but now they can't connect to anyone outside their home system. Trade networks that had operated smoothly for centuries were collapsing as coordination problems multiplied. Human logistics specialists had served as neutral mediators, who understood how different alien business practices could work together. Without those cultural translators, simple commercial transactions were becoming impossible to complete. The Galactic Science Consortium had shut down most of their research projects after human scientists departed. The alien researchers discovered that human scientific methods, which they had dismissed as chaotic and unstructured, were actually essential for solving complex problems that required creative thinking. Admiral Grace Thompson received updates from monitoring stations positioned around the galaxy's perimeter. Each report brought news of another civilization struggling with problems they couldn't solve. The Zephyrian Empire had lost contact with 30% of their outer colonies. The Caltharian Republic was experiencing industrial production failures on dozens of worlds. The smaller species are being hit the hardest, Grace noted while reviewing the latest intelligence summaries. They were completely dependent on human technical support but never realized it because the humans worked so quietly in the background. The Centarian Trade Federation had been one of the galaxy's most successful commercial organizations, but they were now facing bankruptcy as their shipping networks collapsed. Human coordinators had managed the complex logistics required to move cargo efficiently between hundreds of different worlds with varying gravitational conditions and atmospheric requirements. Without human oversight, cargo ships were getting lost in hyperspace, arriving at wrong destinations, or suffering equipment failures that stranded them between stars. The aliens had assumed that shipping was simply a matter of pointing ships in the right direction and letting automated systems handle the details. Captain Davies received a priority message from the Human Leadership Council stationed in the Andromeda approach. The Council had been monitoring the galactic collapse and debating whether humanity should respond to the increasingly desperate calls for assistance. The alien governments are offering us complete autonomy over our former territories, the message stated. Some species are willing to grant humans full administrative control over their core worlds in exchange for technical support. They finally realized they can't maintain their civilization without us. But the damage was spreading too quickly for simple technical assistance to solve. The interconnected systems that made galactic civilization possible had been designed and maintained by humans for centuries. Replacing that infrastructure would require decades of work. Assuming the alien civilizations could survive long enough for repairs to be completed, Ron looked at the long-range sensors showing the dying lights of countless worlds. The aliens had driven away the people who made their civilization possible, and now they were paying the price for their arrogance. The galaxy was learning that true strength wasn't measured in military power or technological advancement. Sometimes the most important people were. Fleet Admiral Grace Thompson stood in the command center of the UHS Horizon, humanity's largest exploration vessel, watching the desperate search fleets that now scoured the galaxy looking for any trace of human presence. 2 years had passed since humanity quietly departed, and the alien civilizations had finally understood the terrible truth about what they had lost. The massive viewscreen displayed tactical data from across known space, showing the movements of combined alien fleets as they followed every possible hyperspace signature that might lead them to humanity's new home. The once mighty galactic powers had united in their desperation, putting aside centuries of rivalry to focus on a single goal: finding the humans and bringing them back. Commander Steve Johnson approached with the latest intelligence reports, gathered by human reconnaissance teams. His stealth ships had been monitoring the alien search efforts for months, observing fleets that grew more frantic with each failed expedition. The Zephyrian-Caltharian Alliance launched another deep space mission yesterday, Steve reported. 50 ships heading toward the Magellanic Clouds based on some hyperspace trail their sensors detected 3 months ago. It's the 4th major expedition this year. Grace studied the fleet movements on her display. The alien search ships were impressive vessels, but they were breaking down at an alarming rate, without human engineers to maintain the complex systems that made interstellar travel possible. The alien fleets were operating with reduced efficiency and frequent mechanical failures. How many ships have they lost to equipment malfunctions? Grace asked. Steve consulted his datapad. 17 vessels in the past 6 months. Most suffered hyperspace drive failures in deep space. The aliens are pushing their technology beyond safe operational limits because they're so desperate to find us. On the bridge of the Zephyrian flagship Eternal Glory, Admiral Kexfel studied star charts that showed no trace of human presence anywhere in known space. His ship represented the most advanced technology the Zephyrian Empire could produce, but it was plagued by the same maintenance problems that affected all alien vessels since human departure. Kexfel had been searching for humanity for 18 months, following rumors and sensor ghosts across thousands of light years. Every lead had proven false. Every promising hyperspace signature had led to empty space or natural phenomena. Humanity had vanished completely, leaving no trail that alien technology could follow. "Sir, we're receiving another distress call from the home fleet," his communications officer reported. 3 more worlds have lost orbital platform stability this week. The Caltharian engineers still can't figure out how to maintain the human-designed gravity control systems. Kexthal closed his eyes in frustration. While he searched the void for humans, his civilization was collapsing behind him. Every day brought reports of new failures, new disasters that only human knowledge could prevent. The atmospheric processors on the capital world were running on emergency power, held together by desperate improvisation that bought a few more days at most. Dr. Helen Martinez monitored the alien communications from her research station positioned in the space between galaxies. Her team had been analyzing the intercepted messages for patterns that revealed how completely the alien civilizations had depended on human competence. "The search fleets are sharing technical data now," Helen observed. "Species that refused to cooperate with each other for centuries are now exchanging their most guarded engineering secrets. They're hoping someone might have preserved human technical manuals or recorded human maintenance procedures. But the aliens were discovering that human knowledge couldn't be easily transferred or replicated. The technical manuals they found were filled with references to intuitive adjustments and experiential knowledge that couldn't be learned from books. Human engineers had developed their skills through years of hands-on experience, understanding systems in ways that couldn't be programmed into alien computers. Commander Paul Stevens led a reconnaissance mission to observe the remnants of the former Galactic Federation capital. The once magnificent space station now drifted in a degrading orbit, abandoned after life support failures made it uninhabitable. The aliens had evacuated millions of residents to emergency shelters on nearby worlds, but those temporary facilities were also failing as equipment broke down. "The Federation Council chambers are completely dark," Paul reported from his stealth ship. "The station's central computer systems crashed 6 months ago, and they can't restart them without human technicians who understood the initialization procedures." The Galactic Federation had been the pinnacle of interstellar cooperation, a symbol of unity between dozens of different species. But it had been built and maintained by human engineers who worked quietly in the background, making the impossible seem routine. Without those humans, the Federation's technological marvels had become elaborate monuments to their own dependence. Lieutenant Commander Amy Walsh intercepted desperate communications from the Outer Rim territories where smaller alien species were facing complete extinction. Her monitoring station detected final transmissions from worlds that were going silent as their inhabitants fled dying planets or succumbed to environmental collapse. "The vegan colonies are broadcasting evacuation requests," Amy reported to Admiral Thompson. "Their terraforming systems have failed, and the planetary atmosphere is reverting to its original toxic composition. They're asking any passing ships to rescue their population before the air becomes unbreathable." The terraforming technology had been developed by human scientists who understood the complex biological and chemical processes required to maintain habitable environments on hostile worlds. The alien colonists had assumed the systems ran automatically, never realizing that human biotechnicians were constantly adjusting bacterial cultures and atmospheric mixtures to prevent ecological collapse. Dr. Nancy Foster studied the psychological profiles of alien leadership based on their increasingly erratic communications. The stress of watching their civilizations crumble was affecting alien decision-making in ways that made their search efforts even less effective. High Chancellor Vexthal is showing signs of severe cognitive impairment, Nancy reported to her research team. His recent broadcasts contain logical inconsistencies and emotional outbursts that suggest his mental state is deteriorating under pressure. The other alien leaders are exhibiting similar stress responses. The alien leaders had built their careers on the assumption that their species represented the pinnacle of galactic evolution. Discovering that they were completely dependent on humans whom they had dismissed as inferior was a psychological shock that many couldn't handle effectively. Captain Lisa Morgan commanded a deep space exploration vessel that monitored the edges of former human territory. Her ship detected the approach of another alien search fleet, this one composed of species that had rarely worked together before the crisis began. "We're seeing Regellian warships flying alongside Centaurian trading vessels," Lisa observed. 6 months ago, those two species were engaged in a border dispute that nearly started a war. Now they're sharing fuel and supplies to extend their search range. But cooperation alone couldn't solve the aliens' fundamental problem. They were looking for humans using technology that was breaking down faster than they could repair it. Their search fleets were like patients seeking doctors while suffering from diseases that made the search itself impossible to complete successfully. The alien communications networks continued fragmenting as coordination protocols failed without human maintenance. Species that had been able to communicate instantly across thousands of light years were now reduced to sending physical message drones between star systems. The galactic internet that had connected billions of worlds was becoming a collection of isolated local networks. Admiral Thompson received updates from human colonies in the Andromeda galaxy where refugees from the Milky Way had established thriving settlements. The reports showed a stark contrast between human adaptation and alien desperation. New Terra colony is reporting successful harvests from their third agricultural season, Thompson read from the latest dispatch. Population is stable, infrastructure is expanding, and morale remains high. They've developed new technologies based on lessons learned from the galactic collapse. Meanwhile, the aliens continued their futile search through space that held no trace of human presence. They followed false leads and pursued sensor phantoms while their homeworlds died behind them. The great civilizations that had once spanned thousands of star systems were shrinking back to their core territories as outlying colonies became uninhabitable. The alien fleet searched desperately through the cosmic void, not understanding that humanity had moved beyond their reach. The humans weren't hiding somewhere in the galaxy waiting to be found. They had left entirely, taking their irreplaceable knowledge to a new home, where they could build something better than what they had lost. The search would continue until the alien fleets broke down completely, their crews stranded in deep space, aboard ships they couldn't maintain without the human engineers they had driven away. The galaxy was learning that some mistakes couldn't be undone, simply by wanting desperately on woe. Captain Chris Powell stood on the observation deck of humanity's flagship as it orbited New Terra, watching construction crews complete the final sections of their first major city in the Andromeda galaxy. 5 years had passed since humanity quietly departed from the Milky Way, and the contrast between their new home and their old one could not have been more dramatic. The massive viewscreen showed real-time feeds from monitoring stations that still watched the former galactic territories. Where once mighty civilizations had spanned thousands of worlds, now only scattered outposts remained. The great alien empires had collapsed entirely, their populations reduced to small communities struggling to survive on worlds they could barely imagine. Dr. Angela Wood approached with her completed analysis of the galactic collapse, a comprehensive study that documented exactly how and why the alien civilizations had failed so completely. Her research team had spent 3 years examining every aspect of the disaster, creating a record that would serve as both historical document and warning for future generations. "The final numbers are staggering," Angela reported to Captain Powell. "The Zephyrian Empire has lost contact with 97% of their former territories. The Caltharian Republic controls only their home system and 2 nearby colonies. 43 species have gone completely extinct, and another 67 are down to populations small enough to fit on single worlds." Chris studied the data displays showing the scope of the collapse. Each red indicator represented a world that had gone silent, its population either dead or evacuated to refugee camps that were themselves failing as equipment broke down beyond repair. The aliens had built magnificent civilizations, but they had built them on foundations they didn't understand. Admiral Kevin Long entered the observation deck carrying the latest transmission from the galactic remnants. The message had been broadcast across all frequencies, reaching every corner of space where humans might be hiding. It represented the final admission of complete defeat by beings who had once considered themselves the masters of the galaxy. "This came in an hour ago," Kevin sighed, activating the message playback. "It's from the Unified Remnant Council, which appears to be what's left of all the major governments combined into one desperate alliance." The viewscreen displayed a collection of alien leaders who looked nothing like the proud rulers who had dismissed humanity 5 years earlier. High Chancellor Vexthal appeared first, his blue skin now pale and marked by stress lines that aged him decades in just a few years. Behind him stood representatives from every surviving species, their usual arrogance replaced by obvious desperation. "To humanity, wherever you may be," Vexthal began, his voice carrying none of its former authority. "We acknowledge our complete failure to maintain the civilization you helped us build. We formally surrender all territorial claims and governmental authority to human administration. We offer unconditional submission to human leadership in exchange for technical assistance to prevent the total extinction of our species." The message continued with detailed offers of everything the aliens could still provide. They promised to serve as labor forces under human supervision, to turn over all remaining technology and resources, to accept any terms humanity might demand. The proud beings who had once dismissed humans as primitive and inefficient were now begging to become servants in their own former territory. Dr. Sarah Kim reviewed the psychological profiles of the alien populations based on communications intercepts from the past year. The mental health crisis among the survivors was as severe as their technological failures, with entire species showing symptoms of collective trauma from watching their civilizations collapse. "They're exhibiting classic signs of learned helplessness," Sarah explained to the assembled human leadership. After years of watching their best efforts fail catastrophically, many alien groups have simply stopped trying to maintain their remaining infrastructure. They're waiting passively for either rescue or death. The insectoid hive had been among the first major casualties of the collapse. Queen Zartek's final transmission, received 3 years earlier, had been a desperate apology for her species. Treatment of humanity. The rigid social structure that had made the hive so efficient under human guidance had become a death trap when they lost the human engineers who understood how to maintain their environmental systems, Captain Lisa Morgan commanded the monitoring station that tracked the final collapse of the galactic communication networks. Her team had watched the slow fragmentation of the internet that had once connected billions of worlds, observing how the loss of human-design compatibility protocols had isolated entire sectors of space. The last major communication hub went offline yesterday, Lisa reported. The Centaurian system was the final link between the core worlds and the outer rim territories. Without it, the remaining alien populations are completely cut off from each other. The galactic internet had been one of humanity's greatest engineering achievements, a system that allowed dozens of incompatible alien technologies to work together seamlessly. Human programmers had created the translation protocols and compatibility layers that made universal communication possible, but the aliens had never understood how complex and delicate those systems really were, Admiral Grace Thompson received daily reports from human colonies throughout the Andromeda galaxy, each one showing how successfully humanity had adapted to their new home. The settlements were thriving using the lessons learned from their time in the Milky Way, building sustainable civilizations that didn't depend on complex interdependencies between hostile species. The agricultural worlds are exceeding all production targets, Grace read from the latest colonial reports. The engineering teams have developed new, terraforming techniques that are faster and more efficient than anything we used in the old galaxy. We're currently supporting a population of 4 billion humans across 230 worlds. The contrast with the dying Milky Way could not have been more stark. While alien civilizations collapse under the weight of their own technological dependence, humanity had flourished by building systems they actually understood. The human colonies were expanding steadily, developing new technologies and establishing trade, relationships with local species they encountered in Andromeda. Dr. Ben Carter studied the final medical reports from the former Federation territories, documenting how the collapse of human-maintained biosafety protocols had led to pandemic outbreaks that devastated the remaining alien populations. The cross-species disease barriers that humans had quietly maintained for centuries had failed completely without their oversight. The estimated casualty rate from biological causes alone is approaching 60% of surviving populations, Ben reported. The aliens never realized that human immune systems and medical protocols were the only thing preventing massive cross-contamination between incompatible species. Commander Steve Johnson led the final reconnaissance mission to the former galactic capital, now a dead hulk drifting in space. His team documented the empty corridors and darkened command centers where galactic civilization had once been coordinated. The station's beautiful architecture remained intact, but without human engineers to maintain the life support systems, it had become a magnificent tomb. The Federation Council chambers are preserved exactly as they were on the day the last survivors evacuated, Steve reported. All the alien artwork and cultural displays are still in place, but there's no power to the environmental systems. The temperature inside is approaching absolute zero. The reconnaissance team discovered thousands of personal items left behind by alien officials who had fled in panic as their government collapsed. Among the debris, they found copies of the original human evacuation notices, documents that had once been dismissed as irrelevant paperwork from an inferior species. Captain Powell walked through the halls of the Human Leadership Center on New Terra, past offices where coordinators managed the thriving colonies and research labs where scientists developed new technologies for their expanding civilization. The building buzzed with quiet efficiency, a sharp contrast to the desperate communications still arriving from the dying galaxy they had left behind. The final transmission from the Milky Way came from a single Zephyrian survivor on an outer Rim world where the atmospheric processors were failing. His message was simple and heartbreaking, acknowledging what the galaxy had lost when humanity departed quietly 5 years earlier. "We understand now what you were to us," the alien said. His words broadcast to empty space. "You were not our servants or our inferiors, you were our foundation. Without you, we are nothing. We were fools who drove away the people who made our greatness possible." But humanity was no longer listening to messages from their former home. They had moved beyond the galaxy that didn't appreciate their contributions, building something better in a place where their skills were valued and their efforts were understood. The aliens had learned too late that true civilization wasn't built on superior technology or military might, but on the patient competence of people who made everything else possible. The great lesson of the galactic collapse was simple, sometimes. The most powerful response to rejection is to quietly walk away and build.